Okay, so I'm here with Steve Jones, our Chief Instructor from our Dudley Academy. We're going to talk a little bit about how martial arts and self-defence or self-protection relates to how we see martial arts today. So Steve, we've been teaching locally for 20 years, training for decades together. More lately within the academies we've seen people talking about self-protection, self-defence. What's your thoughts on that?
Well, first of all, I think it's two completely different areas, but they have overlapping, really, shall we say. So when we work in the martial arts, we're working our attributes that we will need if we ever do have to go physical on the street and defend ourselves. But I think what's missing from most of self-protection training is the mentality side of it, and what goes on in your mind and your body when you're under that emotional stress of a real situation.
So, in terms of a martial artist, and we know if we look at, we've been lucky to train with some of the great competitors in the world, and they have a certain mindset. But I think a lot of people need to understand that that kind of training and fighting is building a specific skill set. Whereas when we talk about self-protection, certainly my idea of self-protection is I prefer self-protection over self-defence. Defence to me says I've got to kind of wait for something to happen, and as we've had the conversation, action always beats reaction, whether it's right in front of somebody or whether it's in the run-up to something happening where I'm deciding where the exit is, where things are, what should be happening. Do you think that's what we should be looking at in terms of adding to our student curriculum?
Yeah, so when you was talking about action and reaction, everybody thinks action is going to be a physical technique. But it can be something as simple as seeing the bad person over the road and going the other way, and giving yourself permission to take that action, not be caught in the fight, flight, and freeze situation.
So I know from some of the research that we've done, people who end up in that situation, very often if they freeze, then they suffer quite a lot of mental trauma after, as opposed to some of the research that says, well, actually, if you try to do something back, then at least you're able to live with it better. Would that kind of align with what you think?
What the research says is that if they took some kind of positive action rather than freezing, even like I said, going back to the other side, just leaving, they took a positive action and done something about it rather than becoming a victim. And then even if they go hands-on, shall we say, doing something physical back rather than being a frozen target or a victim.
So in my mind, when I talk to people about this, they kind of fall into two categories. The people who are martial artists who train because they believe a physical response may be necessary, probably for other reasons, to get the black belt, reach their own potential and so on and so forth. But very often for me, and the people I think that need this kind of stuff more, is the person who will kind of say, well, I don't think this will happen to me. I don't think that I'm going to be in that situation, or I'm going to do my best to avoid that situation. And I always feel those are the type of people that we should be trying to get a message to, saying, 95, 98% of what you do is the preparation to avoid that. If you just avoid it anyway, and it happens, and you have no game plan, no mindset, no skill set, no knowledge, then you are going to end up in a situation that you're just not able to cope with. Would that be a fair?
Yeah. So that's what causes the freeze, by not giving yourself permission or having the training of a game plan in your head that if this happens, I'll do this. If this happens, I'll do this. So having that game plan kind of overrides that freeze mentality that goes on in the brain when you get the adrenal dump out on the street, and it gives you an option rather than freezing and becoming a victim.
So I know that you kind of head self-protection as far as we go with your own history. It's very, very important to you. We've got some dates coming up where we're allowing outside people into the academy for a taster, 3 free tasters with a precursor to a longer course if they think it. Okay. So obviously there'll be details that are on the website. So hopefully, if that's answered some questions for people, and we'll look forward to seeing you on the course.